Well, I wanted to introduce you to Jeff Leimbach, our speaker tonight, and Liz and I had the opportunity to see two of Jeff's programs that were offered through Shutterbug. And so, of course, we begged him to come and do a program with us. And so he so nicely said that he would. And so I'd like to turn over our Landscape Basics program to Jeff.
All right, well, cool. Do I turn it over to somebody from here or no? Also, I'm impressed. Linda and Liz, you saw two of my classes and you're going to sit through another?
I know.
Oh yeah, well worth it.
Okay, well, I hope so.
It's great.
You put me on the spot here now. I've got to perform, right? I have no choice. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and let's see. I've got this down. As we talked about earlier, I've got it down pretty much to a science here. There's a system that you have to do. Start the program after you share the screen, and that way all my boxes line up, so I can still see you guys on one screen and my notes and everything. Now, I will ask, do you see a slide up, a full slide?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's not my notes because that would be bad.
I just got one request. Everybody mute themselves.
Okay.
Me too. It's okay. I won't. All right. So we're going to talk about landscape photography basics. I call it basics because this is really kind of set up like if you and I were going out and setting up and shooting. These are some of the things that we would talk about and some of the discussions we would have. So I want to kind of keep it in that kind of a format. This is not the most opportune platform to teach you about landscape photography. That would be on site, right? Out in the field with our hands on the cameras, and we can actually do things. We can't do that right now. So once we can start doing that again, that's a better opportunity to learn, is if you can take some of those field trips that your club's doing and get out there and actually do the work. But this is the best we have right now, so we're going to take advantage of it. And we're fortunate that we have this environment, right? That we've gotten technology to the point where once this pandemic thing happened, we were really able to just roll right into these virtual classes and virtual meetings and stuff, and it's just really a fantastic thing for everybody. So let's move on. I just put this in literally while we were talking. I made this slide because I realized, hey, I didn't have an introduction slide, which I normally do if I'm doing this for Canon. See, I forgot to take the Canon logo out. So I apologize to all of you who are not shooting Canon. It doesn't matter what you're shooting to take this class or to listen in. But anyway, so my background is real quick. I don't want to belabor it, but I am a Canon product educator for Canon USA. I'm also a Kelby 1 instructor, for those of you who are familiar with Scott Kelby and his organization. I'm an architectural photographer. I did the Kelby seminar tour for many years, landscape workshop owner for years, worked for Moose Peterson on his digital landscape workshop for a year as an instructor. Used to be a creative director in an ad agency. I'm a dad, husband, Gold Star brother, Orlando Camera Club, and just a goof off kid at my age. So get out of that. Now you know who I am. Now you know where I'm coming from. So you can say, who's this guy telling us about landscapes? I'm sure a lot of your landscapes are every bit as good or better than what I'm going to show you tonight. But I do have a background in helping people achieve backgrounds, or not backgrounds, but landscapes. So let's take a look at landscapes. Now, through this class, I'm going to do my best to give you an idea of where, or tell you exactly where I was when I photographed the image. This is very image heavy, but it's not just oh, I was at this place and this is why I like this picture, and I was at this place because I like this picture. Every image that I'm going to show you tonight, I'm going to try to show you some nice imagery, but also lessons in each one of those images. They're not just up for no purpose at all. With that, I'm also going to try very hard to tell you exactly where. So sometimes I'll have to jump back and say, oh, I forgot to tell you that. Do my very best to remember to tell you where I am. So I'm going to try to do that up front right away, but when I get to each slide. Also, I was very careful about putting in images that are very easily accessible. I didn't want to put in images that you'd have to hike to the backcountry a day and a half to get to a spot. These are all accessible. Everything is pretty easy to get to. There may be a couple of them that might be a little tricky, but most of them are pretty iconic type landscape shots. So just keep that in mind. I did my best that way. So let's move on. When I write a class, typically the first thing I do is I go to the internet, because I want to get information from the internet. And I know the internet's never going to lie to me. I know that everything I get off the internet's going to be accurate, and I can trust it. So I went to the first definition I found for landscape, and it says, all the visible features of an area or countryside or land. Now it goes on, but I'll stop it there. That's very vague, right? It's extremely vague. It doesn't tell me how large the landscape is, how little the landscape. It doesn't tell me if it needs to be large or small. It doesn't tell me if I can add man-made subjects into that, or does it have to be all natural? It's kind of wide open. So I do take a kind of a liberal view of what that term means. So if you see a bridge in one of these landscapes, just know that that the definition here that I got off the internet, and we know we can trust it, didn't tell me I couldn't put a bridge in there. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. Also, I was told I wrote this class for Canon to help us with our stores and help us stay engaged with our photographic community. So my boss said, well, you need to put something in there regarding safety. And I said, yeah, that makes sense, because when I do a workshop, when I teach a workshop, that's the first thing we talk about, right? Hey, be careful. Hey, don't go so close to the edge, right? So let's talk about that for a minute. We do put ourselves in precarious positions sometimes, right? We're on the edge of things. We're in nature where things aren't always secure. Here I am photographing at Horseshoe Bend, and it looks like I'm ready to teeter off the edge. That's a little deceiving. I wasn't quite that close, but situational awareness is very, very important when we're out here. You got to be careful, and you also got to know your limits. You don't want to hike 3 hours into a waterfall and then not be able to hike 3 or 4 hours back out. You just need to know what your limitations are and stay within your limitations. There's a lot of photography and a lot of great landscapes that can stay within just about any limitation that you have, whether it's very limited or not. Also, I would recommend working with the buddy system, right? Go out. We've learned that from an early age, the buddy system. Let people know where you're going. There's a reason why the Park Service puts those kiosks at the trailheads that tell you to fill out that envelope with your driver's license or your license plate number and your phone number. Because if they drive by there at night and find a car there, maybe they need to go searching for somebody. I was going to say, recently I just started thinking about this a little more, and I realized that my wife and I, every Sunday, or almost every Sunday, we sit and we watch a few of these Northwoods Law Show, and it's marathon every Sunday. So we've pretty much seen them all now, but it amazes me how many times they have to go searching for someone or rescuing someone that has been out, and they come to find out that person was only supposed to be out for an hour. I was only going for an hour. I don't know what happened. I got turned around. I got lost. It happens. It's happened to several of my friends in places that they should not have even gotten lost in. And they had to rely on things like GPS and stuff to be rescued. So just keep that in mind. Let people know where you're going and when you're supposed to be back. So that's enough about safety, but I think it's important enough to kind of talk about that up front. You never know what the environment's going to throw at you. So let's talk about gear. I'm not going to talk about cameras. Really, the camera is immaterial here. And anything that I show you tonight, you're going to be able to capture with any camera that you have now. The cameras are so good these days, whether it's a mirrorless camera, DSLR, it really doesn't matter, nor does the brand. We're not going to talk about brands at all. But we are going to talk about lenses. That's important. So we will go over those. But it really doesn't matter what camera you have. You'll be able to deal with anything we're going to show you. The gear I'm talking about here, though, is just gear I'm going to have with me. The important gear that I want to make sure I have with me for a decent landscape shoot. And the first one is a good sturdy tripod. So this is the one item that I actually take extras with me to a workshop, because I know that 1 or 2 people are going to show up with one of those travel tripods. Now, I don't want to badmouth those travel tripods, because I take one almost everywhere I go. I have one that fits in my suitcase and I take it everywhere. However, I don't take it here because I know that I'm going to put myself in several situations where that's just not going to do the trick, right? We're going to be in probably windy conditions, could be. We might be in some rainy conditions or uneven and unstable ground. I want to make sure that my tripod is a very solid base for my cameras. So that's one thing I would seriously recommend is getting a real sturdy tripod. Plus, you know, those travel tripods only go up to about 3 feet. So if you're any taller than 3 feet, you're going to be ducked over the whole time, leaning over. Your back's going to ache, your neck's going to ache, and you're not going to want to get up and shoot the next day. So keep that in mind. Comfort plays into the equation here quite often. You know, we need to carry our stuff. We need to get it to where we need to be. And that's pretty important. I have this great think tank roller bag, which is really great for zipping through airports or through hotel lobbies. And I take it everywhere I go, except when I'm going out landscape shooting, because I can't drag that thing up a trail. It's just not going to work. So let's find a way to put it on our back or put it on ourselves to carry it out there. Lately, I've fallen in love with these sling bags. These sling bags they're not going to carry as much stuff, but I don't carry as much stuff as I used to. I can fit an awful lot in one of these sling bags. I put the camera on a strap, put one lens on it around my neck, and put the sling bag with 2 or 3 other specialty lenses in the back, and I'm ready to go. I can put my water bottle right here in this pocket here. I can actually strap my tripod to it. There's a lot I can do with that, and it's really not as cumbersome as a big backpack. So if I'm only going for a couple hours, that's what I'm taking. We're going to talk about filters. Yes, I do carry filters, and yes, I do use them, and we'll take a look at those in a little bit. Some type of remote control, especially if I'm doing long exposures, or I'm going to do a waterfall or something that I know that I'm going to need it. I like to have one of those in my bag, but I got another trick that I've been using instead of that as when we get to the section about that. So. Also, these little tools are great. You gotta have some tools with you, and here's why. Typically, everywhere I go, I notice people around, and I look at what people do and how they're functioning, because I certainly am not the master of all things photography. If I look over and I see somebody that's kind of doing something different, I say, man, I like that. That might work. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to use it. But I'll always notice that there's a few people that have, and it's usually with flimsier tripods. They'll go out and they'll set their tripod up, and all of a sudden their camera starts to do this, starts to dip and twist, and it's because, number one, either the tripod's not heavy enough or not strong enough to handle the weight of the camera that they have, or they haven't tightened down that plate on the bottom of your camera, the head plate. So having one of these tools is really almost mandatory, because you want to be able to tighten that plate up. You'll never tighten it back by hand. You'll be twisting that thing all day, and you'll never get it tight enough. So take one of these tools. The blue one here is a three-legged thing. And the other one is a Leofoto. That's Leofoto. And they're fantastic tools. They're under $10. They have a little carabiner clip, so you can put it right on clip it right to your backpack strap or your belt loop or wherever you want. But they're really, really handy. And they're waterproof. How about that?
What was the blue one? What's the name of the blue one?
The blue one is a three-legged thing. Now there's an extended term for the tool itself, but if you just type in a three-legged thing multi-tool, you'll come up with that. So the other one again is a Leofoto, Leofoto. The next thing is extra batteries and camera cards. So these are really important. Obviously, you want to have enough power, right? You don't want to run out of juice right in the middle of a shoot, but you also don't want your camera card to go bad. I'll tell you a trick that I've learned over many years. If you don't ever want a camera card to go bad, here's a surefire way to make sure that camera card will never, ever, ever fail on you. That is to take extra cards, because Murphy's Law plays into effect here, and it demands, and it says that if you take extra cards, the card will never go bad. The one time you take that one card and you don't take any extras, it'll go bad. I guarantee you. It's like watering the grass, watering the yard. We know that if we go out and water our grass later in the day, it will rain. If we don't want it to rain, we don't water the grass. That's just the way life works. So make sure you take extra camera cards with you. Here's something you just pick up at the grocery store or pick up at Walmart, and that's Ziploc bags. And you say, well, that's not really camera gear. To me, it is, because I don't know what situation I'm going to get myself into. I'm a lot of times I'll get caught in the rain. I'm often caught in the rain, actually. I might have to cross a river, or maybe the composition that I want to get on a waterfall or a creek or a river, I need to be in the water. And I want to make sure that I can keep my stuff dry. And I don't mean necessarily my gear. I'm not as concerned about my camera and my lens. I know they can absorb some bit of water. I'm not worried about getting that gear wet with rain, at least. I don't want to submerge it, but at least I don't have to worry about the rain. But my car key fob, my wallet, any of that type of stuff, I don't want to get wet. I always have extra bags to go ahead and put my stuff in. And it doesn't matter if it's a half-hour trail that you're going to go off or an overlook. You could still get caught in the rain. A headlamp. So a headlamp or a flashlight. This is important because oftentimes we are photographing sunsets. What happens after sunset? Nighttime. It gets dark. There's a lot of times, for instance, Delicate Arch in Arches National Park. If you've ever been there for sunset, you know that you're probably going to be doing that long hike back in the dark. Make sure you can light the trail. And also, even if you think that you're not going to be out after dark, you never really know. You never know if you're going to take that wrong turn on that trail that's going to get you stuck in a situation where, hey, it might have been a good idea to have a light with you. The next thing is nourishment and hydration, right? We want to make sure that we stay hydrated, even if it's short walks. Drier conditions obviously are really bad for hydration and dehydration. So make sure you have water with you. Also, take some snacks with you, especially if you're going to take a 3-hour hike into a waterfall. You want to make sure that you have enough energy to get back. And I will tell you, one Cliff Bar will last a very long time. You can live a long time on one Cliff Bar. You might not live so long on not having water, but I'll tell you what, you have that Cliff Bar with you, and that'll hold you over for quite a while. So just a little tidbit there, little lesson from experience. Let's talk about lenses. I went through a whole slide. Now I'm going to get back to that slide because that photo shows up again. So I'm not going to worry about going back and telling you where it is. So this particular photo was taken in Olympic National Park. Great waterfalls in Olympic National Park. So if you ever get an opportunity, great place to visit. But that's where this particular photo came from. So let's talk about lenses. This is the way I'm going to approach this. I'm going to approach this like, you came to me and you said, hey, Jeff, I want to get into landscape photography. What lens would you recommend I get? And I would first ask you, well, what lenses do you have? Let's take an inventory of what you got before we go recommending any lenses. But this is what I would tell you in kind of in this order. So keep that in mind in this order. There's another thing I want you to keep in mind. When I show you the next slide, you're going to see a Canon lens. Don't be freaked out by the Canon lens. I have to show you those because that's what I have. And I did write this for Canon, by the way. So just kind of keep in mind what the lens is and not what brand it is. So your brand of camera will have a very similar lens. So take that to heart and kind of adapt that thinking to your own brand and your own lens. So the first thing I would ask, and the first thing I would recommend, is an all-around type of a lens, an 18 to 200, 28 to 300 in the Canon and the Nikon line, 24 to 105, 24 to 240, something like that. Gives you a great range, right? It's got some short telephoto, it's got some wide angle, it's ready for any situation you kind of come into. And that's the kind of the lens that I'll put on my camera. If I told you about the sling bag where I'll put one lens on my camera, because I'm ready for anything that I come across on my hike. Now, when I get to the scene that I'm going to photograph, maybe that's when I pull out the fisheye or a specialty lens that I want to use at that point. But this one is kind of ready for any environment I come up with. So that's the first thing I would say is a standard telephoto or a standard zoom type lens that you can use for anything. The next one is a wide angle lens, a wide angle zoom. So this is probably the lens that if you came to me and asked me, this is probably what you had in mind. And it's probably the first thing I think of too, because we think of landscapes as this grand view image of the world, right? This beautiful, very wide space that we're looking at. So that's kind of the idea that we get with landscapes. I want to change I'll change your thinking on that a little bit, hopefully later on. But the grand view is kind of what we have in mind when we talk about landscapes. So definitely a wide angle zoom. The next thing is I would recommend a telephoto lens, a longer lens. Now, about half the images that I'm going to show you tonight were taken with a longer lens, with a 100 to 400 or a 70 to 200 or the new RF 100 to 500 if you can find one. So this is kind of the scenario where people don't think of long lenses and don't think of telephoto lenses, but they are really handy for capturing landscapes. So this is it. This is kind of what you this is a nice kit, right? It gives you, it covers every base. It covers long, it covers really wide, covers everything. You can make a living off of these three lenses right here. But we could expand that, right? Once you have these, maybe we want to branch out into this is specialty lenses. Maybe it's an ultra wide angle, this 11 to 24 from Canon, or it might be maybe a tilt shift lens or something of that nature. One of my favorite lenses to take is a fisheye. And you say, well, fisheye distorts everything. We'll talk about that and we'll dispel that myth here in a minute. But a fisheye is fantastic. Number one, super lightweight, super compact, fits in your bag. You don't even know it's there. And it's ready for you. And it can become an ultra wide angle lens for you. So I take a fisheye almost everywhere I go. I love that lens. And then of course, I'm shooting. If you're shooting with one of the mirrorless cameras these days, it doesn't matter what brand. There may be other lenses that you have that are not made for that particular mount. Make sure that you have an adapter with you. Make sure that you can adapt those lenses that you have. The worst case scenario is if I walked out with one of my R system cameras with this 8 to 15 fisheye, which is a different mount, and I didn't have that adapter with me, I'd be in real trouble because I wouldn't be able to use it. So just remember those. And if you do have older lenses you want to adapt to your newer cameras, make sure you have the ability to do that. Now, I'll tell you that's a lot of glass. That's a lot of money up there. Okay, that represents Canon's top of the line lens collection right there, with the L glass. If you're familiar with Canon, that doesn't mean that the lenses you already have are not going to be suitable. Remember, I asked right off the bat, I would ask you, well, let's see what you have already. Let's see if there's something that you have that will take the place or use that. And maybe it's a lens that doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg, right? This EFS 10-18 is a very reasonably priced lens. It's not the same quality as some of those other ones, but it'll still do a really, really great job. So any lens that you have can be used pretty much for landscape. But let's kind of take a look now at what uses and what some of these lenses can do for your landscapes. So right up front, this is Bryce Canyon. Hopefully some of you have been to this beautiful place, but Bryce Canyon in Utah. And notice that this was taken with an ultra wide angle lens, really wide to capture the entire valley. And you say, well, yeah, it's wide side to side, but that's not always why I use an ultra wide angle lens. Sometimes it's all about the height of the image too, getting down in here in the lower valley here with these trails, but also showing the sky up there. It's not just wide, it's tall. So there's sometimes I'm looking at a landscape and say, hey, I don't know, I don't care necessarily that I'm capturing the width of it, but look at the height of that. That's kind of neat. I like what's happening up here and what's happening down here. So there's more than one reason to use an ultra wide angle lens. Here's another reason. This particular image was taken at Mesa Arch in Canyonlands National Park. That's just north of Moab, Utah. And you'll hear a lot about Utah tonight. Utah is a beautiful, beautiful state. California is too, don't get me wrong. But Utah, I love it. So this particular scenario here, I'm really, really close to the subject. So I'm literally about 1.5 feet from this tumbleweed bush right here. I don't know what plant that is. Maybe you know what it is, but it's just one of those plants that hangs on to life, right? Well, I'm really close to it. Like I said, I'm about 1.5 feet from it, and because that lens is so wide, I get this really interesting sweep of everything else that's going on around it. So I can be really creative and look at things in a different way, just because I can get really close to subjects and still see what's going on around it. A standard wide angle lens. This is bad water in Death Valley, and I do know that I need to change my notes because I just copied the slide from a different one. And fortunately, I didn't tell you that this was Dead Horse Point State Park, because I'd be dead wrong. Now, this is, again, bad water in Death Valley. One of my favorite places to shoot. And you'll see a lot from Death Valley here. But this was taken with a wide angle lens. And the reason I chose that is because I wanted to accentuate these shapes and this crystallization and this cracking of the earth, this drying and cracking of the earth. I wanted to kind of put that right up front and accentuate and magnify the foreground there for you. Of course, the sky's beautiful too. That night we were fortunate there, but that's why I would use a wide angle there. Same scenario here. This is Death Valley as well. These are sand dunes, and the subject here is not really the sand dunes necessarily. What I was interested in really capturing was this texture here, this beautiful texture, this rippling of the sand dunes here, and how the light was reacting to that. So I wanted to make that the main focus of the image itself and kind of throw your eye into that. I mean, that's the thing that you see right away. It's kind of hits you in the face. That's kind of what I wanted to do. Everything else is just kind of like supporting subjects to that. But the wide angle lens allows me to do that. If I was using a telephoto lens here, we'd be cropping into an area here. We wouldn't be able to get that accentuation of that foreground. And here's the use of a fisheye. And you say, yeah, of course that's a fisheye. Look at that. Look at the curvature of the horizon line. You may look at that and you say, well, I don't like that very much. That's okay. I kind of like it like that. I think it's pretty neat. The reason I used the fisheye here was because this is Horseshoe Bend in the Colorado River. This is actually what you got here is you got Glen Canyon Dam up here to the right, and Lake Powell in behind that dam, and then this is the Colorado River down dam here. It goes around around here and works its way down through the Grand Canyon and then to Lake Mead and Hoover Dam. So that's a lot of information that you may not want to hear, but that's what it does. And this spot right here, just south of Page, Arizona, is a great place to photograph. And now they've controlled it these days. They've got you now have to pay to park, and you have to kind of wait till they open the gates. It used to be just wide open. You'd have to go by the mile marker, and it was great because we'd be going in the early in the dark, and we'd be counting mile markers. There we go, pull in, and that's where it was. You know, it was so great. But they commercialized it now. But it's still a great place to photograph. So when you get there, a standard wide angle lens sometimes isn't wide enough to get edge to edge on the river here. Sometimes it crops it really close. And that, to me, the crop that close just isn't a very interesting image. It looks like it's tight and it's just uncomfortable. So this, without doing a pano stitch, which you could do, you could take multiple images across the stream, one here, one here, one here. You could do that and then stitch them together later. There's nothing wrong with that, and it works really, really well. It's just a lot of extra work. The fisheye lens captures the whole thing because it's a 180-degree view. And Lightroom has an algorithm that with one click will take the metadata from your file and say, hey, that was a fisheye lens. That was Canon's fisheye lens. I know how to correct for that. I know how to straighten that distortion out. And one button clicks and corrects that for you. And now all of a sudden you've got this ultra wide angle lens with a flat, straight horizon line. Pretty cool. So just keep that in mind. That could be a really interesting lens. That's another reason for it that really, it can really ultra accentuate your foreground if you use it in the right way. This is again in Death Valley and crusted earth. I love crusted earth. So here I wanted to accentuate that crusted earth and kind of twist it into a nice composition, which the fisheye lens did quite well. But I also use, I'm showing a lot of fisheye lens here. I wonder why. Maybe because I like it. Yeah, it's just a great lens, right? So here's an image of a fisheye lens, and no, I didn't straighten it out here. And you say, well, that doesn't look like one because the horizon line's straight. Well, if you take your camera and you keep your camera perfectly level, you level out your camera on your tripod, the horizon line or the middle ground of that lens is not going to have any distortion. So you don't have to worry about that distortion. It's when you start to tilt your camera up and down. I did that backwards. Up and down. Hopefully you weren't watching me do that. But if you tilt your camera up and down, you start to get that distortion in the horizon line. But here, what's nice about this is my horizon line's straight. So you don't know there's distortion, but there's a lot of distortion. Right here in the tree, up top, the clouds. The rock formation here is kind of stretched out a little bit. So this is a tree at Dead Horse Point State Park. It is well photographed. I've seen it on many book covers. My buddy actually had this very similar image to this on PPA Magazine's monthly magazine cover as a little before COVID hit us. So the interesting story about that was that we were out photographing this once, and I was bored with it. I said, I've seen this picture so many times, I don't want to take it anymore. So I pulled my fisheye out thinking, oh, okay, I can get something totally different. And I did. And we got back to the hotel. He walked off. We got back to the hotel, and we were looking at images, and he said, where was that? Where was that tree? And I said, we photographed that tree. You know where that tree is. And he goes, no, I never saw that tree. I said, you saw the tree. Trust me. It's the main tree that everybody photographs. And he said, how'd you get it to look like that? I said, well, I used a fisheye. He said, when did you do that? And I said, when you walked away. And he goes, why didn't you tell me you were doing that? And I said, I don't have to tell you everything. So he was pretty upset with me. And I'll tell you, he stewed over that for about 2 years. I'm probably telling you more stories than you want to hear, but he stewed over that for 2 years, and he never let it go. He went back, and when he went back, he took a fisheye with him and he captured it with a fisheye. And daggummed if he didn't get the cover of PPA magazine that one month with that particular photo. So in the end, he got me for not sharing with him. I should have done it, but I was very proud of him, very happy for him, because he got a very stellar image out of that. Well, that was a long story for that slide. Okay, so here's a telephoto lens. There's landscapes that are way out there that need to be brought closer so you can actually capture them. And that's why I always have a telephoto lens with me. This is in Mesa Arch, so it's out quite a ways through the arch, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. You'll see that image again. Here's an interesting image from a telephoto lens. This is a single leaf in Yosemite National Park. So you can find these leaves anywhere. You don't have to go to Yosemite to capture a leaf like this, but that's where I was. And beautiful morning. But I love the shape of this particular leaf, and I wanted to isolate that leaf. There were other leaves on the branch, other leaves on the tree, other branches. There was a pine forest behind it that was, kind of distracting from it. I said, well, how am I going to isolate that leaf? So I just capture it. And I said, well, telephoto lens. Yeah, that'll blur out my background really nicely because it's a little further away, and I can kind of just focus on just that particular leaf, and telephoto lens allows me to do that. This is on the Oregon coast. So there's a lighthouse that was probably, I don't know, distances are hard for me when I'm looking out over. It still stuns me that when I stand on either rim, north rim or south rim of the Grand Canyon, that I'm looking across and that other side is 10 miles away. It's staggering to me. I can't wrap my head around it. It looks like it's not that far, that I could actually just walk over there, but it's 10 miles. Same thing here. Cross the little sound here, probably 1.5 miles, I would say, maybe 2 miles. But if all I had with me was that wide angle lens, that lighthouse would be too small in my frame. It wouldn't have enough pixel resolution to actually make an image. So just throw the telephoto lens on, zoom in, compose it the way you want to, and you don't have to worry about that. It's great for isolating things. So as we mentioned with the leaf, here's Death Valley again with the sand dunes. Great rolling. I want to capture just those rolling dunes there and the layers of those dunes. If I showed you any more of this, it would kind of it would make it busy, and you take your focus away from that. So you can use these telephoto lenses to focus in on a specific area of a landscape and make an interesting detail of that landscape. Let's move on to filters here. Again, I'm going to try to give you as much information as I possibly can in the hour and a half that we have. So let's talk about filters. And I can't give you serious lessons on how to use them, but I'm going to approach it the same way I did the lenses. If you came up to me and you said, well, for landscapes, what filter would you recommend? The first one I could recommend, and it was interesting because my daughter asked me this question right before I wrote this class, and this is exactly the way I approached it. I said the first one I would recommend is a circular polarizer. Why? Because that circular polarizer can be used for multiple purposes. Okay, it's not a single use type of a filter. What's nice about it is the first thing is, and what most people try to use it for, is to make their skies bluer, right? Take glare out of their sky and make it bluer, and diffract the light a little better. So it worked great for that, really great for that. But it also cuts glare. It'll cut glare in glass, water, anywhere. For instance, this stream, this creek, you see a lot of the reflection of the trees in the sky over here. If we want to cut through that, we basically just use the circular polarizer and we can cut that glare out completely. Even like cabins or that have glass, old cabins that have glass and stuff that you don't want the reflection, you want to see through that glass. A great opportunity to use a circular polarizer. The next thing that you can use that circular polarizer for is to cut light. Sometimes in waterfalls and long exposure, we need to cut light because our cameras won't expose for a long enough shutter speed. We want to get that shutter speed slow enough to show motion sometimes. So a circular polarizer can stop, depending on the filter that you get, up to 3 stops of light, sometimes 3-4 stops of light, depending on that filter. So that might be a use for it. So there's 3 good uses I've just given you for that one circular polarizer. The next one is a variable neutral density, especially if you're going to do long exposure with waterfalls or any other type of long exposure that we'll discuss later. The variable neutral density filter is fantastic because that cuts light, and that's all it does. It cuts light. And it can cut up to, depending on the filter that you can get them in 1 to 3 stops, 3 to 6 stops, 1 to 6 stops. The one I have is 1 to 9 stops. So I can get up to 9 stops of light blockage. I can do some really long exposures with that particular filter. From there, you may want to move on to a different type of filter. These are not circular. They don't screw on, although they do have, you can buy a holder for them and slide these in. A lot of times I'll simply just use my forefinger and thumb and hold them up to my camera. But these are graduated neutral density filters. They're the two filters flanking the sides here. And you'll notice they're darker on the top. They've got a little bit of graduation moving to clear. Now, that's not white, it's clear. And what that does is allows us to balance our exposure. A lot of times a sky will be overexposed where the foreground and your subject is properly exposed. So what we can do is we can just take that horizon line and put it right at the horizon line here, and it will balance that exposure and kind of blend that together. You won't see this harsh line of properly exposed versus not. So basically it'll cut that harsh line for you. And that's a great way. We can do a lot of that in post now, but not to the level that you can do it in camera. Basically, you'll only be able to bring back so much, so many stops in post-production. With these filters, you have much more control over how much exposure you bring back. So great set of lenses or filters to have. Now the next thing is here I will show you the one in the middle here is what we call a 10-stop filter or a big stop filter. Some brands call it 10 stops, some call it a big stop, but basically you can't see through it. It stops a lot of light. Up to 10 stops. It is emitting light, believe it or not. Light does penetrate through that, but you're going to need a really long exposure for it. That variable neutral density will get you, if you get the right one, it'll get you almost to 10 stops. But if you want to do really long exposures, you're going to need to stop down 9 or 10 stops in a lot of cases. So moving on, let's talk about shooting. So I get asked a lot of questions when I'm out in the field doing a workshop on, what settings are you on? What exposure, what shutter speed, what aperture, that kind of thing. And a lot of times it just depends on where you are. There's no magic formula for anything. So with that in mind, the biggest question I get after that is, well, what mode are you shooting in? And people seem to think that they have to be in manual mode a lot or often, and that's not necessarily the case. I try to consider 3 things when I'm trying to figure out what mode I want to be in. Those 3 things are, number 1, well, here it is, 3 things. Okay, number 1, do I want to control motion? Is there motion in my image? Do I want to control it? Let's look. Here's that Olympic National Park waterfall again. If I want to control motion, that is either freeze motion or show motion. I want to be in TV. That means that I'm going to set the shutter speed for the motion that I want to see, and I'm going to let the camera do the rest of the work. I'm going to let the camera take care of the aperture. You know, we spend a lot of money on our cameras and they think really, really well. They have great new processors in them that can outthink me every second of the day. So I let the camera do as much work as possible. So motion in my image, it's going to be TV or shutter priority. I want to set the shutter speed, let the camera do the rest. Do I want to control depth of field? Is there motion in my picture? Maybe not. Maybe it's depth of field I'm after. Here's an image from Grand Tetons off a dirt road. So in this particular image, there's really no motion. There might be some breeze blowing the tree or something. I'm not as concerned about that. Maybe it's just the depth of field. I want to make sure that this road is in focus from front to back. My subject's in focus. Everything else is in focus. If I want to do that, I need to control my aperture. So I want to be an aperture priority or aperture value. That means that I set the aperture for the depth of field that I want, the result that I want, and I'll let the camera do the shutter speed. I don't care if it's 30th of a second or a 30-second exposure. I'm on a tripod. I'm locked down. I got that heavy tripod, right? I'm not concerned about that. So if there's motion, shutter priority. If there's no motion, I want to control depth of field, it's aperture priority. The only time that I will consider anything else is when I want to overrule what the camera wants to do. There's a situation that I just need to tell the camera to do something different. I don't want the exposure they're trying to give me. And that's when I want to try to get real creative, maybe. Maybe it's light painting. This is Thor's hammer in Bryce National Park. And here I need to control everything, because if I allowed the camera to control this, it's completely dark. It's in the middle of the night, completely dark, and it will not create the proper exposure, especially once I start brightening it, hitting the subject with a spotlight. So I need to set it in manual mode for that very reason. So I will tell you that manual mode gets set on my camera, and this is across all photography genres, whether I'm doing landscapes or any other photography, maybe 2% of the time. Seriously, 2 to 3% of the time I'm in manual mode. The rest of the time, I'm letting the camera do as much of the work as I possibly can, as it possibly can. Subject. Big important subject for me, because I think what we shoot and if we can start to see the world a little differently, we'll find more opportunities for great images. So let's look at that. This is just a lake. It's some kind of pump house on a lake in upstate New York, not far from Lake Placid. I'll be honest, I have no idea what the name of that lake is. I was taken there and forgot to ask. So that's that. It's a lake in New York. So here, this is the Grand Teton. This is actually the Grand Teton, and so this is a grand view shot, right? This is what you're thinking about when you come in and you say, I want a landscape lens. We're thinking of the wide angle, big landscape, big sweeping landscape. You got to get this, right? You got to take this picture. But there are other images that can be had. For instance, this detail shot of an aspen forest. You know it's an aspen forest. You see 3 aspens. That's all we need to see to tell that story. If I start to widen out and show you more and more of what's going on in that forest, the focus goes off of those 3 trees a bit, and it starts to force your focus elsewhere, and it starts to get busier and busier and busier. Maybe I don't want it busy. Maybe I just want a simple little composition to tell a simple little story. The neat thing is that this image is right in these trees. It literally is this forest right here. Now, I will tell you that those 3 trees are a little off frame here, but they're right there. So you always hear that. I always heard this. You hear this in photography school, and you'll hear, what's the best time to take a vertical shot? The best time to take a vertical shot is right after you take a horizontal shot, right? So if that's the case, let's kind of change that up a little bit. Let's say, what's the best time to take a detail shot? That's right after you take the grand view, right? Get both. But look at the world a little differently. Don't be so blinded by the grand view that you miss all of the little detail images that you can create that are just as compelling and just as interesting to me as those grand view shots. Let's look at a couple examples of that as we move forward. So here is Mesa Arch. So this is not a great landscape shot, I will admit, but I'm using this for an example here. So I took this photograph one morning, and first thing I want you to do is notice something. Look along here, and hopefully on your screens you can see this, but look along here. I don't see a single telephoto lens, not a single one. These are all wide angle lens. Keep that in the back of your mind. Don't dwell on it right now. Just keep it in your back of your mind. I have a point that I need to make later with that. But just take a look at this. Mesa Arch, on any given morning, you will find 40 to 50 photographers lined up. Now, Mesa Arch is in Canyonlands National Park, just north of Moab, Utah. Great place, but again, very busy, very crowded photography spot. Everybody wants to capture the grand view, the cream of the crop, the shot that everybody wants, and this is it. That's the arch. This is it. I got a trick for you. That right there, that arch, when those people line up, I've seen arguments break out. I've seen people kicking other people's tripods. They say by mistake, by accident, when it's really not. I've seen arguments because everybody wants this spot right here. I'll use my cursor here. This spot right here. And if you don't get up super early in the morning and you're not the first couple people out there, you're not going to get that spot. Doesn't mean you won't get the picture. Right here, everyone in this line thinks that these are the people that are the only people that are going to get the perfect picture. Well, I will tell you that if you wait for the melee, wait for everybody to fight it out. If you're not the first one there, don't panic yet. This glow stays longer than people think. Everyone in that line will take their photos, click, 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 and they'll look at the back of the camera and go, oh my gosh, I got it. My bucket list shot. That's the most beautiful shot I've ever taken. That's all I need to do. They'll leave. They will be out of there. And they do. They scatter fast once that light comes up. So here's your opportunity. Swoop in, take the picture. This was taken literally with my fisheye, handheld, after everybody left. There were still a few lingering people, but everybody left. I walked right up, snapped the photo. I didn't have to get in the melee with my tripod. So just keep that in mind. But remember, I told you to notice that there were no telephoto lenses. While everyone was waiting hour after hour with their tripod set up in the cold, waiting to shoot this shot, everyone missed that shot. This is in Mesa Arch, and it is a detail shot that's right there. All they needed to do was put a telephoto lens on for a few minutes while they were waiting for the other shot, or after they got this shot and taken that, because it's right there. Don't be so blinded by the grand view. Don't put blinders on and just look at the grand view that you forget to look at the details and find other images that are in that grand view. I'll put it this way. There's a statement that you'll recognize. It says, don't miss the trees for the don't miss the trees for the forest, or don't miss the tree for the forest. Or don't miss the forest for the trees. That's the way it's supposed to go. I'll get it right. Don't miss the forest for the trees. I'm going to flip that for you. Don't miss the detail because you're focused on the grand view. Don't miss the detail for the grand view. Get them both. Get them both. Death Valley. I told you I love Death Valley, so I'm going to show you a lot of it. So this is the last example of grand view and detail. This is Death Valley in the wintertime. How do I know it's wintertime? Because it's the only time I go there, January or February. I value life. And if I want to photograph sand dunes, I don't want to go out in the sand dunes in the summertime. And this guy out here, this gentleman that you see walking out here, there's no way I would fear for his life if he was out that far in the summertime. So that's another reason why I know it's winter time, because he'd be foolish to be that far out in the summer. But anyway, here's the grand view. You got to get that. It's really kind of neat, right? Doesn't mean that right behind you might not be a detail shot that's good with a telephoto lens that you capture. This is every bit as interesting to me as that other image. And it's in the same spot. It's really in the same area. It may be it's a different trip, but a slightly different time of day, a little later in the day. later in the morning, I would say. I wasn't out there later in the morning, but that's all you need to show. I don't need to show you anymore. You see a bush surviving in a harsh environment in the sand dunes. You don't need to show anything else. Show the detail. So details can be very simple by design. You don't have to be very complicated with these, but they can still be really neat images. So look for these images, look all around for them, and see if you can't create and expand your photographic vision. Let's talk about long exposure. Long exposure is typically, I'll say these are pylons in, these were taken in Sanford, Florida on a lake. But these are pylons. Typically with long exposure, we think about waterfalls. This is typically what we think about. It's what I think about when I think about long exposure. So waterfalls, I photograph a lot of them. Sometimes I photograph a detail here. This is in the Sierra Nevadas. And if I showed you any more than just this simple little composition here, there's a log here that's damming up a bunch of dead leaves, and a stick here with a bunch of leaves hanging off of it that are kind of wilted and hanging off, and it's just not very pleasant, right? So a simple little detail is all I need to show you that it's a fast-moving creek. So if it's motion, what mode am I going to be in? TV or shutter priority. Set my shutter speed. For a faster shutter speed, it's going to freeze motion. So in this case, 1/10 of a second, more detailed water. So you're going to freeze these droplets. And some of them are kind of washed through there, but most of them a lot of them are frozen. You can actually see the water droplets themselves. So if you want to freeze motion, faster shutter speed. I like a combination of both, really, in a lot of my work. So 1/10 of a second. Here's one, again, in just a creek in the Sierra Nevadas. This one actually is up around not too far from Yosemite, and it's 1/4 of a second, right? So a little more blur, but still we get a little freezing here and there, a little freezing of motion. Now, does this mean that I just walk up and say, well, here's the magic formula, it's 1/10 of a second or 1/4 of a second, and that's going to give you the perfect image? No. It's going to take some experimenting, right? And that's one reason I don't like to give kind of specifications like, well, if you're doing waterfalls, what shutter speed should you be at? What aperture should you be at? It just depends. Every waterfall is different. Every flow rate is different. Every light scenario is different. You got to experiment. Put it on something. It doesn't matter what it is. 1/4 of a second, 1/10 of a second. Start with that. Look at the back of your screen. Say, hey, well, that's too bright. That's too frozen. The water's too frozen. It's not silky enough. Change it. That's all you got to do. Change it. This probably took me 5, 6, 7 frames to actually get it the way I wanted to get. So don't be afraid to do that. So I'm not going to give you any magic formula. Plus, this same waterfall, if I photographed it in the morning, went back in the afternoon and tried to get the same results, my light has changed. That's going to change the settings. The flow rate might be different. The water may slow down or speed up. That's going to change everything. So don't be so hung up on formulas. If people give you those formulas, just go out and experiment with it and you'll get it right. Here's 1/8 of a second. Now, when we get these longer waterfalls, the gravity takes over and they fall at faster rates. So you get more of a freezing motion with the same type of shutter speeds. So just keep that in mind. If you want to freeze that, you're going to have to go faster and faster. I just want to ask you a question here, and this, you don't answer it. You just kind of answer it in your mind. How cool is that piece of property up there? There's one thing I noticed about that, though. It is really neat, and it'd probably be really neat to live there, except if you sleepwalk. It's not a really great place if you sleepwalk. Come out on the balcony at night and fall over and down the creek and over the falls. So not good for a sleepwalker, but man, can't imagine what that piece of property cost. This is Yosemite, it's Upper Yosemite Falls. And again, a really fast shutter speed, but we're talking about later in the day. It's late morning here. It's not necessarily a great time to photograph, but we can go with a faster shutter speed to catch that. There's a lot of water flow there. So again, it's just, you never know what that shutter speed is going to be. So what if we want silkier water? We want that kind of that milky, silky, smoky type water that we always see, that effect. We want to go, again, we're still controlling motion. We're showing motion here. We want a slower shutter speed. So what happens is while that shutter's open for a long period of time, these water droplets kind of flow through the frame and streak the frame. So that's motion blur. That's all that is. And we can get those results. 6 seconds on this exposure. Yes, you're going to use filters for this. This particular fall is in Glacier National Park. This is in Devil's Den National Park. I photographed it not necessarily for the waterfall, but I love this little emerald pool here with the circular leaves in it. So 1/10 of a second. Be careful if you go too fast with your shutter speed. You go too fast and you might, I'm sorry, too slow. You go too slow with your shutter speed, you might, your water might disappear. So the waterfall here is getting a little weak there because my shutter speed was slower. So be careful with that. You kind of balance that out sometimes. We don't always have to think about waterfalls when we talk about long exposure. There's some beautiful long exposure work being done now of just normal scenes that have motion in them. For instance, the current here, this is in Pensacola, Florida, out on the Gulf of Mexico, just an old pier. And the current here is moving. And instead of freezing that choppiness, let's slow the shutter speed down to 30 seconds here, put a filter on it so we can do that and get that smooth kind of comfortable, relaxed type of a feel to the image. Your sky is going to soften up too with any motion in clouds. So give that a try. These can be really interesting photos, really quite comfortable and just really soft and nice. So here's one, Hanalea Pier in Kauai. So it started to rain when I was photographing on the beach, and I ran under this pier to keep dry. Started photographing it and then wasn't happy with anything I was coming up with. So I put a 10-stop filter on, that big stop filter we talked about, and set it for 7 minutes. And got this, and this water's really smoky. There, it looks like it's almost could be coals embering or something if it was the right color. But anyway, there's a really long exposure. There's a couple of things you're going to have to do to get a really long exposure like this, or really any long exposure for that matter. You're going to need that tripod, that real steady tripod. Again, we've got the camera open, the shutter's being exposed for 7 minutes. We can't let anything move that camera during that 7 minutes, or we're going to get motion blur everywhere else. So it's going to be a throwaway image. So we got to make sure that it's locked down tight. The next thing is that we're going to have to stop light. It's inevitable. There's no way you can get a 10-minute exposure or 7-minute exposure without stopping some kind of light. So this big stop filter here, or up to 9 stops on the variable neutral density, will get us to where we need to be for that. The next thing is we need to control our camera, number one, without touching our camera, and number two, we need a way to lock it down in bulb mode. And some of the newer cameras will have timers, bulb timers in those cameras that will allow you to lock them down through the menu. But some of the older cameras won't. We have to actually click the remote control and then lock it with a locking device or a timer that might be on it, depending on the sophistication of your remote. But we need a way to do that. Lately, all I do over the last couple of years with the Canon cameras is I just hook it up to my cell phone. The camera creates a Wi-Fi hotspot that joins right to my phone. I don't need any kind of other network, but Canon has a free software or free app called the Canon Camera Connect app, and that allows me to control my camera completely right from my phone. I can change the settings. I can actually take a picture. I can review my pictures. Everything's right there. I can even touch focus on that screen to actually focus if I have a autofocus lens. So a great opportunity to do that. So you need those things if you're going to do really long exposures. Let's talk about weather here. This is a section I added back in real quick when they told me I had a couple more minutes than an hour to do. So let's talk about weather. People have told me that I've heard this a couple times, so don't kill the messenger here. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just repeating what somebody else, a couple other people have told me over the years. They say that Ansel Adams was not a landscape photographer. Don't kill me. He was a weather photographer that happened to take adverse weather in beautiful landscapes. I look at some of his images. That could be true. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if he's ever said it, but more than one person has told me that over time. So here's an image of Highway 128 north of Moab, Utah, and a storm that just was dogging me most of the day, and is finally catching up with me. Monument Valley. So I was in Monument Valley for a day and a half. This is the only image, the only time I saw Monument Valley. What a bummer, right? You spent all that money to go Monument Valley, and you don't see it. But keep an eye out. Don't be discouraged by the weather. Sometimes it can surprise you. This is one of the most unique images of Monument Valley that I have ever taken. And it's because I just kept looking out the window and said, oh, you know what? Maybe there's something there. I'm going to go set my tripod up. I'm going to wait. And I waited long enough for this to clear up, just long enough for me to take a couple images. So don't give up on the weather. Another example of don't give up. I took a couple, husband and wife photography team, hired me to take them out west, guide them to a couple of their hotspot or bucket list type shooting locations. And we were out for 7 days, and we ran into, we were out for 5 days. 2 of those days were travel, but we were out for 5 days, and we ran into a blizzard, and a lot of our shooting opportunities were gone. Because of that blizzard, but it opened up a whole new world of other opportunities for us. So we pulled into this overlook in the south rim of the Grand Canyon, which we had never intended on being there, but we're forced that way because of weather. And I said, you know, there's a really great overlook over here. And they said, well, how would you know that? Because we can't see it. I said, I've been here. Trust me, it's a good overlook. We may or may not see it, but who knows? Who knows? Let's go take a chance. And we did. And I swear to you, 15 minutes later, after this particular shot was taken, this Grand Canyon shot opened up for us. And the clouds cleared just long enough for us to take a few images, and we got this. Again, this Grand Canyon South Rim. And one of my favorite Grand Canyon photos of over all the years that I've photographed there, because it's got so much going on. It's so much drama there. There's the snow, the warmth. And then there's the clouds. So don't be afraid of weather. It can really make for really nice images. Don't be afraid of the weather. Don't be afraid to get wet. If I was afraid to get out of my car and get wet and get my camera gear wet, I would have never captured this. This is called Rainbow Falls in upstate New York. Again, not far from Lake Placid, but it was raining. I could sit in my car and not take this photo and just drive by, or I can take a chance, get a little wet, and have this image. I'll take the image. I can dry my clothes. This is in Yosemite National Park, but it's all about talking about time. You got Half Dome right here. If you guys, a lot of you probably are very familiar with that, but there it is. So people will tell you that mornings and afternoons and twilight are the only times or the best times that you can take photos of or images of landscapes. I agree. Those are fantastic times. Those aren't the only times. Let's explore time a little bit. Mornings. This is Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. Point and shoot camera. Just taking a walk early in the morning. Got up early. Had my point and shoot camera in my pocket, said, you know, that's pretty cool. Take a picture. Always be prepared. This is in the Grand Teton. I talk a lot about isolation and separation, and this is a great way. One isolated tree. The isolation doesn't come from light necessarily. It comes from the color and the type of tree it is. It sets itself apart from the rest of the background, which I think is pretty neat. Early morning here, it's oftentimes it can be really cool looking. And I don't mean cool like, hey man, that's cool. No, I mean cool like cool weather, bluish, right? Cold too, by the way. Wintertime again, Death Valley. Early mornings are great to just just kind of take in the environment, right? This is in Grand Teton, a early morning lake. There was nobody out there. It was just so peaceful and quiet. You heard a few birds going about their business, and not much else going on. No traffic sounds or anything. Some cricket sounds and stuff. Just absolutely beautiful that morning, and very serene. So I love mornings, especially if I can get out by myself or with a friend, or at least tell somebody where I'm going and when I'll be back. Yes, my safety rules. But mornings are great. This is Arches National Park. So oftentimes with landscapes, especially with workshops, we're up super early in the morning before the sun comes up. We get out, we're freezing cold, especially a Florida boy like myself. I get cold, I chill. And we set our camera up and wait a couple of hours for the sun to come up. And it gets closer to sunset. You check your phone to see when it's going to come up and how close it's getting. All of a sudden you see off in the distance, you see that sun kind of cascading across the landscape, and you start to get excited. You get more and more excited as it comes further and further across the ground. And all of a sudden it hits and lights up your subject, the thing you've been focused on. And you go, oh my gosh, click, 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 click. Look at that, click, click, click. And then you realize, I'm not cold anymore. What happened? Oh, it's still cold. Okay, well, I'm gonna go click again so I can warm up, because you forget about that kind of stuff, right? And then that moment when that sun hits your face for the first time that morning, man, those are mornings. I gotta tell you, those are great times. So, when it was also great is that's the time when that sun finally hits my face and I've got the photo and I've got the shot. I know the breakfast is coming. And I know that if I'm at Arches National Park in Moab, there's this great restaurant called the Jailhouse that has these ginger pancakes and thick cut bacon that they actually bake instead of fry. And it is to die for. So I digress. Okay, food is always top on my ticket. Okay, so midday. People will tell you can't take landscapes in the midday. Well, I suggest you find something else to photograph in the midday. Find a different type of landscape. This is the Narrows in Zion National Park. Great place to photograph in the midday. A lot of times because the light doesn't reach the canyon till later in the day. Maybe it's some of those detail shots. Maybe it's walking through the forest, looking for those leaf combinations, maybe a little mist on the leaves, or some macro work. Or here in Glacier National Park, where I came off a long morning hike for my morning shoot, and my feet and my ankles were killing me. So I took my boots off, got in the water and waded around a little bit and looked down. I said, that's pretty cool. Look at those ripples. Leave that circular polarizer off and capture that. Canyons, slot canyons, Lower Antelope Canyon in just outside of Page, Arizona. How do I know this is midday, later in the day? Because look at that light shaft. That sun shaft is straight down. This one is actually maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1:30 maybe, because of that angle. But the light doesn't reach those canyons or gets down into those canyons till later in the day when the sun's higher in the sky. So it's a great time to take those types of images. How about here, the Narrows again, in Zion National Park? One of the greatest hikes you'll ever take. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. The hike or the trail is the river. It's the Virgin River that cut the canyon. And again, the trail is the river. So it's fantastic. My family loves it. But again, until the sun reaches a certain point in the sky, it can't reach into the canyon and hit these canyon walls like it does here. So you gotta wait till later in the day. Gives you time to get way up creek. Atmospheric conditions sometimes in the middle of the day can change things. This is in Banff National Park, and it actually, it wasn't smoke, it wasn't fog. I don't know what it is. It was some kind of weird, eerie glare that was out there. I can't describe it. I have no idea what it was, but it made for a pretty interesting photo. So I captured it. Afternoons. Yes, here, this is one of the magic moments, right? Afternoons are great. Why? because the sun is lower in the horizon. If it's lower in the horizon, it's got to cut through our atmosphere. It's got to cut through more atmosphere, and the light becomes very warm. So what we get is we get this warm light and these long shadows. Warm light, long shadows. Monument Valley. Obviously a different time than that other time when I didn't see it at all. Here, Death Valley again. Long shadows, warm light. This is Second Beach in Olympic National Park. Fantastic place to photograph. But there's this archway, this hole in this cliff right here, and you can actually capture a sunset behind it. So sunsets, when you capture sunsets, try to find some way to make that sunset a little more interesting. Sunsets are beautiful no matter how much how you capture them, even if it's just the sky. I think they're beautiful and stunning. But if you can add a subject to that in some way to kind of break up that, it kind of adds interest to it. This is in Kauai, and this is just a tree out in a cow field, and just that warm afternoon light was just perfectly isolating it from the background and the shadows, the cloud shadows that were in the background. So I had to pull over and had to take that shot. Now, don't take, if you're driving, I said pull over. Don't take these from the driver's seat of your car. You're all old enough to know that it's not a good idea. Pull over and pull far enough off the road so you're not going to get yourself sideswiped. But be safe about it. We talked about safety early on. It goes to play when you're driving as well. So enough of that. Afternoon, right? What do we got? Warm light, long shadows. This is Delicate Arch in Arches National Park. Why would we want a headlamp here? Because the sun's about to go down and it's going to get dark on you and you've got a couple hour hike back. Yep. Good idea to have that headlamp with you. I put this image in recently because I'm heading there in the end of next week, and I'm really excited about it because it's my first real trip since COVID. So Tetons National Park. This is Mormon Row, some off barns. It's not the real famous barns that everybody photographs. It's up the road just a little bit, but really interesting. They're still abandoned and still fantastic against the Tetons in the background. So warm light. And then, of course, there's this time of day called twilight. It's, right after sunset. And actually, once the sun goes down, sometimes it actually gets brighter. For just a little bit of time, it gets brighter because the sun actually reflects off the clouds or the atmosphere and becomes a kind of a more of a softbox almost. And it's a great time to photograph. You can get these really soft pastel-y colors sometimes. But obviously, this is Golden Gate Bridge. You know that. You don't live too far from there. Again, man-made subject, landscape. To me, it is. If it's not to you, oh well. It's an interesting image in the slide presentation. Again, easily accessible. Anybody who wants to go shoot that. I have no idea where this is. Talking about nighttime, I don't know. It's just it's just a bunch of branches with a moon. I have no idea where it was. I just found it and thought, oh, that's a pretty cool image. So I pulled it up and dropped it in. Nighttime, we used to be afraid to shoot at night because our cameras didn't perform very well at night with noise and higher ISOs. We don't need to worry about that anymore. These cameras today are fantastic at nighttime, and it's opened up a whole new world of photography for people. We chatted about this a little bit, or some of you chatted about it before, talking about photographing night skies. So there's this whole area of photography. More and more people are doing it. There's more and more books, more and more lessons, more and more tools that can be used, like stray light cutters and stuff, filters that mitigate stray light and stuff for this type of work. So, a lot of really neat tools and stuff and techniques that are being used for night photography. So take advantage of it. This is Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. They light it up with multicolored lights at night, and it's really cool to kind of watch. This is somewhere in the middle of Nevada. I don't know where it is. I couldn't get back to this spot if I tried. And so I can't tell you. It's in Nevada somewhere. Pretty typical image you could find anywhere and in Nevada. But yes, you're going to ask me, somebody's going to say, look at that and say, well, I bet that's multiple exposure. There's no way he can capture that that moon and that foreground like that. Yes, you're right. There's no way. So our cameras are limited, right? They're limited in their dynamic range, and we have to live with that. It's a limitation of the technology that we have. That hopefully it's getting better, but it still exists. Now my eyes saw that. That's what I saw, and that's what I wanted to represent here. The image is a capture of the moment that I experienced, and for that I had to use a multiple exposure. Every image in photography, no matter if it's film, no matter how pure people want it to be, is processed in one way or another. Even film has to go through a liquid bath of chemicals, and then it has to be printed. That's all a process. Even the type of film that you use back then, the ISO that you use, or the type of, would use Kodachrome or Ektachrome or any of those, that's all a process that changes what your image is going to come out to be. So I have no problem doing this little multiple exposure. These images were taken within microseconds of each other, and I was able to capture, because of the software technology we have today, what I saw and what I experienced. So you may call it cheating. Some people have criticized me for cheating, but that's my explanation for it. And hey, I'm not ashamed of it. Here, just to give you an example, I kind of like this one where the moon isn't seen, right? The moon's kind of streaked out, and that's what the camera would capture, right? So this is Tetons, middle of the night, same area that we were for that other day or morning picture. So interesting thing about the nighttime when you get around cities and around population is the lights can add to the landscape. The lights can be bright and colorful and fantastic, and I like how everything changes at night. So I try to capture that. Golden Gate Bridge from the Marin County side. Evidently, we shortly after that picture was taken, a ranger came by and told us we had to leave. So they don't even let you up there at night anymore. It's a shame that certain people have to do things to they litter and jump off cliffs and stuff and keep the rest of us from having to do things like that. But anyway, that's another story and another topic for another time. Sometimes, hey, maybe we can light paint our subject at night after everybody leaves. Be careful when you do this in the national parks. Some national parks don't mind it. Some won't allow. Yosemite doesn't allow it anymore, probably because few of us probably lit El Capitan up too many times. And no, it's more for poaching because there's illegal hunting, and the rangers have to get pulled away from things if they see spotlights to go find out if somebody's illegal hunting. So I understand completely, and I respect that. So do the research ahead of time. This is an Arches National Park after everybody left. This was quite late at night. Nobody out there, and we were able to do that. So just keep that in mind. And then, of course, this is Yosemite with the moon over Half Dome, lighting it up. Angle's real important. Get moving here a little bit. I just noticed my time. Angles can be pretty dramatic. We know where that tree is. Talk about different types of angles to get certain reactions that we want. We talked about that image. So this is Death Valley. This is the racetrack. The racetrack, you go out there and instinctively, I think, because I see a lot of people doing this, you want to get down low and you want to capture those rocks. And that's great. Do that, but just keep in mind when you do that. And here's me. I'm guilty of it too. So here I am, ducked down here. What happens when you get a lower angle of view is your middle ground shrinks. Okay, you compress that middle ground. You squish it up and down. Right, you pinch it. And if you pinch that middle ground, sometimes you might actually pinch your subject, because the subject here shouldn't be the rock. The subject actually is the trail that the rock leaves behind when it moves across the playa. There's a whole scientific reason why it moves across that playa that I won't get into. You can look it up. They just found out what does it just not that many years ago, but it's pretty interesting read if you get it. But anyway, that's the subject, right? So take a higher angle here. Be careful that your angle is not cutting off something that's critical to the image itself. For instance, the image here, Thor's hammer in Bryce Canyon, the subject is Thor's hammer, right? If I was, when we talk about angle, here's a high angle. So I'm looking down. So there's not like the sky that can actually separate Thor's hammer from its background, right? That might do it. I'm above it, so I'm looking down. So all of that, everything around it's that part of its background. So if I'm standing here and I move a foot to the right, this is going to be my background. If I move to the left, this is going to be my background. And both of those might conflict or camouflage my subject, which is Thor's hammer. So get yourself in the right position, take some time to line it up and find some area, for instance, these darker green pine trees, and isolate or put that subject there where it's isolated or separated from its background, if that makes sense. Reflections are really great. This is in this is called the courthouse, and this is in Arches National Park, and this is a puddle. This is a puddle. It's not a lake. It's not a creek. It's actually a puddle. And here's another example of that, the same area, but again, it's a puddle. I like taking reflections of puddles. Sometimes I'll make those puddles myself. Yes, I'm really careful with what type of water I use, and it is often done on a well. In this case, it's a well-weathered path. So it's a trail that I'm not just going out there dumping water on the environment, but here it is. So how low do you have to get? Here's another example of that. I actually reallocated too many slides here. So here's another example, different time of year. But this is basically how low you have to get for to get these reflections. So this is one of my workshop crew here, and we're actually we had a couple of these ponds set up. But these days it's great because we have these new articulated screens, right? So we don't have to get on our bellies anymore. We can actually sit down on the ground or kneel down on the ground and put our cameras down low and actually see what we're lining up because of that screen. So angles can be real important. This is in the Narrows, and again, I just activated one too many slides. Black and white. So black and white can be really interesting too. This was in Yosemite National Park, and it really wasn't very interesting as a color photo. I got to tell you, it was very distracting. It just didn't do much. So I said, well, there's got to be something there because that haystack with the snow, kind of interesting. Change it to black and white, and it changed everything. So take a chance sometimes and see what it'll do in black and white. This is in Cisco, Utah. It's right in the middle of the state, and it's basically this is backstory to this. It's a post office, and it is actually a functioning post office up to the mid 1990s. So I thought that was pretty cool. It's a shack, but it was a post office, a physical piece of property that up to the mid 1990s. Somebody has actually bought that and changed it to an Airbnb now. You can actually stay there overnight. I thought that was pretty cool. They dialed it up and everything. It's not quite the shack that it looks like here, but can you imagine that as a post office in 1995 or 1994? This is Sunglow Pier in Daytona Beach. Again, in color, I wasn't very interested in it, but as a black and white, it's kind of interesting. It's got a lot of contrast to it. So that image again, Ansel Adams was a master at this, right? Landscapes in black and white. They're beautiful, contrasty. Mountains love it. So this is Half Dome. I think if you could call out the half dome, I might get a little weird here. Don't, it's getting late at night for me. But if I called out the half dome, color black and white, I think it would call back black and white, black and white. You can see it in color, presented in black and white. Some more of those, another one of those racetrack rocks. Great when you can get some shadow, some harsh shadows in light. Again, that playa, bad water in the lowest point in the United States in Death Valley with a fisheye, right? So editing, I'm going to talk much about editing. This is in Lexington, Kentucky, a horse ranch. But let's talk just a little bit about editing. I edit my images in Canon Digital Photo Professional because number one, I work for Canon, so I have to use that software. Mostly I use Adobe Lightroom and Lightroom Classic and Photoshop. Those are my go-tos. I have a long history with Adobe, so I stick with it. And people will ask me, especially on workshops when we're reviewing images and stuff, they'll say, well, what can I do with my image? Inevitably, I will always say, hey, you got to add contrast. You know, you shot that in RAW. The RAW file's pretty flat. Is that really the image? I mean, is that what you saw? No, really, it was more intense than that, right? Because we have a lot of emotion that goes into our images. So let's bring it up a little bit. Add some contrast. Add sharpening. These are two things that if we shoot RAW, we don't have in our images. A JPEG file will already bake these two things into that image, into that file. So we don't have to worry about it, but a RAW file, it won't. And we only shoot RAW. I do anyway. So add contrast, add sharpening. However, don't over contrast and don't over sharpen, don't over edit. Sometimes I'm guilty of this. I do it all the time. I will overemphasize my images and I'll let it sit for a night. I'll come back the next day and say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? That is way overdone, way overbaked. Back it off. Because a lot of times, I mentioned this before, this is what I saw there, but it's not only about the picture, the 2D picture that I see here. I felt the air. I felt the wind. I smelled the air. I heard everything that was going on. There was so much emotion and so much of my senses that were involved in taking that picture. A lot of times, a lot of that emotional flood back, and I want to overemphasize my images because it's just not getting there. It's just not that. It's a better image than that. It was better because all of that is taking place, right? So you have to be really careful not to overdo it and not to let your emotion take over the editing process. So what do we do once we have these images? This is a horse ranch in Kentucky. Print and share them. Don't just hog your artwork. Let people enjoy it. I don't care what you think about your images. The funny thing about sharing my images is I'm always surprised at what images, especially on like Instagram, which images people actually like the most. It's not always the pictures I think are the best. It's pictures that I say, oh man, I almost didn't even edit that picture because I didn't think it was good enough. Don't be afraid to let people see your artwork and enjoy your photography. Every wall in my house is covered with photography and artwork, paintings and artwork. It's not all mine. A lot of it's other people's work, but hang your artwork up in your house. When people come over to the house, let them enjoy your artwork. Let them talk about your artwork. Explain to them where you were and enjoy that process. Share it on Instagram. I go through Instagram all the time. I use it not only to share my work, but to get inspiration from other people's work. I love looking and looking at other people's work and finding out where people are photographing and how they're photographing things. I get tremendous inspiration from the internet and Instagram. Do a coffee table book. These are fairly inexpensive these days. These are fantastic. Gather a couple images, build a book for your coffee table so people can enjoy your work. This is kind of a lost art. Slideshows, when we used to shoot slides, that's the only way we used to look at our images. We click through our images and it's really great to do that still. These days we can do it digitally. We can, there's so many software programs that allow us to do that. If you want to spice that up a little bit, add some music to the backgrounds. You'll be amazed. Again, you're introducing another sense, hearing. You're introducing another emotion in the music that you're playing. You're adding that to your images. It just accentuates the pleasure of your images so much more. There's a reason why Hollywood puts music in the background of TV shows and movies, because it adds another dimension of emotion. And with that, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. If you don't get anything out of anything that I taught you tonight or anything I showed you tonight, I want you to remember this one thing, because it's very important. And this is from a camera guy, okay? I work for a camera company. They didn't like when I wrote this statement, but I leave it in my class because I think it's this important. Sometimes you just need to put the camera down and be in the moment, be in the environment, and just be with yourself. It's crucial to remembering the emotion of a place. Case in point, one of my workmates did a blog post about a year ago, and he did some research on remembering photographs. And he found out through the research that if you take a photograph, your subconscious will remember that there's a photograph of that place. It will not remember the photograph. It will not remember the photograph. If you take the photograph, step away, be in the moment, be in the environment, absorb everything that's going on in that very moment. You smell the air, you taste the air, you feel the wind, you hear the animals and the wind and the birds, you feel the chill, everything that's going into it. You take that in. Now all of a sudden, your mind will remember that image. So it's crucial for remembering that. And with that, I will leave you with this. Now it's your turn. When you can safely do it, and when you're allowed to, go out and take some great images. And if you do, please share those with me on Instagram. I love looking at people's work. Send me a message on Instagram and say, hey, Jeff, check this image I got. I was where you were, and this is what I got from it. I'd love that. My Instagram is JL Photographic. Again, JL Photographic. But please share those with me. I enjoy that so much. And with that, I will stop. I went, wow. Maybe I shouldn't have added those two sections in. I am terribly sorry.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, good.
Glad you did.
Yeah.
This was just charming and so much information. It's really great, Jeff. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you. I try to give you as much as I possibly can crammed into that time. So great. Anybody have any questions? I'm in no hurry. I'm in no hurry here. So
White balance. Do you set it through the camera, or do you set it on your own?
Depends. I'll typically I'll use auto white balance in a lot of situations. With night skies or something, I may want to set a Kelvin number that's in the 5000s or something where I can get a really dark blue sky. But typically I'm using the auto white balance, or I might use one of the white balance cards, one of the gray cards, and just take a quick shot of that out in front of my camera, and that'll do it. The nice thing about landscapes is you can really get away with a lot of that fine tuning the white balance, because nobody really knows what it is. When I'm doing an architectural shoot or a product shoot, people know what the color of that paint on the wall is. People know the color of that product. You need to be dead on with that stuff, and then I'll use other techniques for that. But when I'm in a landscape, it's artwork. If I want to tweak that a little bit and make it warmer or cooler, I can do that and get away with it. So yeah, that's my answer on that. Anybody else?
I just want to tell you that a group of us going to Pinnacle Gulch Beach for low tide tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah.
And we've gotten so much information. It's like, all right,
I got my fisheye.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yes. I love it. Don't be afraid to use it. Just because it looks goofy on the screen, right, doesn't mean you can't straighten that out later. So
You got to watch out for the sun, though.
yeah, be careful. You will get lens flare. You will. And, I talked about that, the white balance target. I use that white balance target. Sometimes I have bigger ones and smaller ones, but I'll use that to kind of hold over my lens, hold it out in front of my lens and kind of negotiate it right where that lens flare might hit the side of that lens. So, yeah, but you can use anything you want. Use a hat or something, use your hand and kind of block that out. But you're right, be very careful with that if that's not the result you want. But now I'm excited, and I'm definitely excited for you guys to share those images with me.
Should be fun.
Yep, no doubt. It's great to get out, right?
I know it's nice to not wear masks all the time.
Yeah, and I mentioned this probably earlier on in the call before a lot of you got on. I'm here in Orlando, Florida, and Florida's pretty much wide open now. I was out today, and today was the first day that I went everywhere I went to, a bunch of errands I ran, and I didn't wear a single mask. I didn't wear the mask for any of those errands. And I noticed I went into Kohl's, the store, to return some Amazon stuff. I went to the post office. I went to the hardware store. I went to Panera Bread for lunch. I didn't wear a single mask. And about half the people that I ran into or saw had masks, half did not. And it was the same with workers too, because the mandate now, the workers don't have to wear masks here either. It's up to them. So about half the workers were wearing, half were not. So interesting to see the progression out of that ruling.
Prime lenses. Do you make use of them a lot?
I don't. I'm a kind of guy that likes to be prepared for anything, and I like to frame things up. There's a lot of great advantages to prime lenses. Sharper images, better image quality because less glass has to go into those. So there's some great advantages to that. I just like the versatility of a zoom lens. So typically not. Doesn't mean I don't use them. I use my tilt shift lenses sometimes for landscapes, and those are primes. So I will on occasion. Typically, I've got a zoom on.
Okay.
And I'm digging Guy's picture there. That is beautiful. I love stuff like that. That is really nice. I went to art school. I went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, and I took graphic design. So anything like that from my painting classes, I used to love doing. So
where's your next trip that you're offering, or?
I'm not. I don't have any. I don't have any workshops scheduled. I did have one scheduled for Page, Arizona area for September, the first week of September, but that's getting pushed back. We're going to push it back a few months. So nothing advertised or anything yet. I am going on a family vacation to Tetons and Yellowstone next Friday, so I'm looking forward to that. And we're kind of anxious to get back on the road with Canon. We do, part of my job is doing events, and I missed it. We haven't done anything over the last year, so I think I did three workshops in 2019 for Canon. So did the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. I did four. I did the Pipe Masters surf competition in Hawaii. Wow. I did Kentucky horse racing and bourbon trail. That was an interesting one. And then there was a hummingbird festival in Mississippi that was really kind of cool. So I get to do a lot of things with Canon. So I don't do as many workshops on my own as I used to because of that. But I had, and it was interesting. One of these classes for, and I know you guys are, you've got was the shutterbugs there, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the shutterbug there. South of you is Sammy's, and
Yes.
yeah, and I got a call from Sammy's asking if I'd be interested in leading some live workshops, and I said, I haven't done that in a long time, so yeah, let's talk about it. So we're working on something. So
My recollection is that down in LA.
yes.
Sam? Yeah,
Yep.
I bought a used lens from them. Actually, it's a 105 macro that I bought probably about 2 months ago. And it's really, well, I haven't seen it. I bought it for myself and my wife has been using it. So anyway.
For a moment there, you scared me.
Yeah, here it's good.
Okay. For a moment you scared me. I thought maybe you didn't get it, like they didn't send it to you. That would be really bad.
Oh yeah, I got it.
I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
I was just laughing.
Oh, yeah, a lot of times I'm trying to find the sharpest point in the lens on maybe a longer shot where I'm not concerned with the foreground as much. Do you have a preference on your f-stop that you like? I find some of my cameras do better at f8 and f11 than they do at 16 or 20 or even wide open, but I guess
Right.
it's a lens thing depending on the lens. But do you have a preference or any comment?
Yeah, I do. It is a lens function. It's not a camera function. So you are right with that. Every lens has a sweet spot. And you have to, I can't give you any examples, but it's somewhere between that f8 and f11 typically with most lenses. And that sweet spot's going to give you the best quality edge to edge. From that, once you start venturing below that or above that, it does start to soften on the edges. It's just because it's diffracting light differently. So it is going to soften up on the edges a bit. And you may or may not notice that. But it is definitely doing that. So what I try to do is try to find that sweet spot and stay in that sweet spot if I can. What's nice about the new mirrorless cameras is we've got a couple features called focus guide and focus peaking, and those can help us narrow down our f-stops to get us where we need to be. For instance, and this is in one of my architectural classes, because I do this every time I have a tilt shift lens on, because the tilt shift lenses are manual focus lenses. So and those two features, the focus guide and focus peaking, only work when you're in manual focus mode. So you have to turn your autofocus off. And what it does is it allows you to see everything in the image that is in focus. It basically puts a red stripe, the focus peaking does this. It puts a red stripe around everything, around the edge of everything that's in focus in your frame. So if I do that, if I start at, say, f16, and I see that everything in my frame, that in architecture would be that door, that window, the tile, those blinds that are right next to me, that kind of thing. But in a landscape, it would be that bush, that tree, that mountain. If I see that all of that is in focus, I can say, okay, well, now I want to try to get to that sweet spot. I want to try to get the maximum quality across the frame. I will start to knock it down. I'll say, okay, we knock it down to, say, 14 or 13, and they'll say, okay, well, I still see the red stripe around everything. So I know everything's in focus in my depth of field. Now I can go down to, say, 11 and 9. At some point, you're going to start to see those stripes disappear. So you're in the middle of your frame, you'll see those stripes, but in the foreground and the background, you're going to start to see those stripes disappear. Now I've gone too far. Now I can back it back up. I say, okay, well, 9 was too low. Maybe F11 is it. So I go back to F11, and now I'm set. F11 will give me as close to the sweet spot of that lens that I can possibly go and still keep everything, my depth of field, everything in that depth of field in focus. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now it takes you a little longer, right? And you have to go out of autofocus, but that's okay. With landscapes, a lot of times we have time to get that settled and get that squared away. I was when I worked on the Moose Peterson workshop, Joe McNally was also one of the instructors with us, and he said, Jeff, you really like these landscapes? I said, yeah, I love landscapes. And he said, well, landscapes, that rock over there doesn't move. And I said, well, that's exactly why I photograph it. I said, you're an editorial photographer. So you photograph moving people all the time. So that's what you're used to. I like to take the time because I can't think that fast. I need to set it up, and those rocks aren't moving. That's exactly why I'm photographing them. That's exactly why I photograph buildings, because I have time to calculate things and set things up. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have any other questions?
Just a deep appreciation. This has been really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, I
Very
appreciate
good.
that. So,
Thank you.
so those of you who have seen it a couple times or seen me a couple times, you're still here. So
Still here.
Yeah.
I haven't lost you yet. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Again, hey, if you guys have more questions later, just get on the Instagram and send me a message through that. I'll be glad to chat with you and answer it. And if it requires me giving you my email address or something at that point, or my phone number, I'll do that if I can't answer the question right away. So anyway, I'm here for you guys, if whatever. I love chatting about this kind of stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, share your stuff with me. I'm curious now about tomorrow's shoot.
Great.
Okay. Well, y'all take care and have a great
Thank you.
night. Thank you.
Thank
You
so
too.
much. Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.